I think he made a career. I think
they-
over 30 years.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. After a brief recess, I will call the meeting back to order. Mr. Tony Foster has arrived. We hope that your tooth is feeling okay over there.
It is right there.
All right.
Thanks.
Board members, as you undoubtedly recall at our last board meeting, both our chair and our vice chair resigned from the board for different reasons. Mr. Russell Johnson became the county attorney, and Mr. Michael Petit tendered his resignation at the end. So just this portion of the meeting, I will oversee. I will manage the process of establishing a new chair. And then once the new chair is established, then whoever that chair is, you can take over and we'll elect the vice chair, and then we'll commence with the rest of the business on the agenda. So first item of business, now would be the time, if anybody would like to make a nomination for chairman of the Caswell County Planning Board.
I nominate Steve Thompson.
I really appreciate that, but being a new member, I feel comfortable right now with that. Y'all don't mind?
So you're going to deny
Yeah,
decline the nomination, okay. Do we have any other nominations for chair of the planning?
Scott Oakley has been a vice chair, and he did a pretty good job, as I'm concerned, and he knows codes real well, probably most of anybody in this room, so I would nominate Scott Oakley.
I might take exception to that.
I'm sorry.
But I understand what. All right, so we have a nomination for Scott Oakley as chairman. Do we have a second? Scott, you could second your own nomination.
Okay. Second, I guess. I nominate Ron Richmond.
All right. And do we have a second for nomination, Mr. Richmond? Yeah. All right, so we have valid nominations from Mr. Scott Oakley and Mr. Ron Richmond. Do we have any other nomination for chair? All right, at this time, I'll close nominations for chairman, and since we have two candidates, I suppose the best way to do it would just simply be a raise of the hand. Please only vote for one candidate. So at this time, all those in favor of Scott Oakley as chairman of the planning board, please raise your hand.
You said Scott Oakley?
Correct. Okay, is that two? Okay. And then all those in favor of Ron Richmond as chairman of the planning board, please raise your hand. And that's 3 votes. Mr. Richmond, would you like to cast a vote? Okay. All right, so by a vote of 4-2, Mr. Ron Richmond is the new chairman of the Caswell County Planning Board. Mr. Chairman, the meeting is yours.
So we do
Vice chair.
Vice chair, we're gonna do the
Same process, yes, sir.
So I just, does anyone want to nominate someone for vice chair?
I nominate Jason Daniel.
That's second. So I guess we'll take a vote and see.
You got a nomination and a second for Jason Daniel. Do you have any other nominations for candidates? Any other?
I'm based Scott Oakley.
Got one for Scott. Scott, you nominate, does that, we still do the same?
You can second it.
Yeah.
You declined it?
We decline it.
Okay.
So I guess we take a vote.
If you may entertain other
Is there any
nominations.
others? We'll take a vote for Jason Daniels.
All right, there's no other nominations, then they'll just become vice chair. He'll become vice chair by acclamation.
I nominate Scott Oakley.
He declined the nomination.
Oh.
Congratulations. Yeah, so, chair and vice chair have been addressed, so now would just be, the next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
So you will read that or?
So this, you would just, ask if, there are any, requests to amend the agenda in any way. If there's no amendments to the agenda, then you can ask for a motion to approve it as is.
So if there's no motions to approve, make any amendments to the agenda, if so, bring them now before us. If not, we'll approve them as stand. Unless Mr. Owen has something to say. Everybody to approve? Okay. Mr. Harris.
You got a motion and a second to approve the agenda as is,
Yes. Mr. Harris and,
Mr. Daniels?
Mr. Dan.
Mhm.
Give us this, what stands approved.
Yeah, you can ask for the yeas and
Unless
nays
it's,
if you like. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's gonna be any objection.
okay.
That is the rule, that's our rules of procedure.
So,
Your agenda, there's the agenda. Yeah, I printed off those rules of procedure just in case we had to hit you with one. So now, right now, we're on item number 4, approval of the July 25 meeting minutes.
so we're gonna look at the July meeting, 25th meeting minutes, and if there's no amendments to that, then we need to approve those minutes. So I'll make a motion. Minutes approved.
Who was the second? Thank you.
Jason.
Okay.
Any public comments, et cetera?
No, sir, we did not have anybody sign up for public comments.
Any unfinished business? I guess we're going to move into the hideout.
Yes, sir.
Oh. I know there was some amendments, so I don't know if we're supposed to entertain any more, or we're gonna keep this plan that we had from before.
Yeah,
What is the board's thinking on that? We going with that same plan that we had laid out?
so you may, if you guys are interested in any additional amendments to that section of the hideout, then you certainly could bring that up, today. Where we are in the process, just to kind of recap on the last few meetings, you know, this had come about, as a result of a solar farm applicant that came before the board. Gosh, I believe that was maybe back in March, sometime, in the spring. And there was a little bit of a gray area as to exactly the way that the stream buffer setbacks applied, and then by extension, the definition of stream buffer setbacks. So a couple of meetings ago, you had instructed me to draft a revision to the high impact development ordinance. That is the document that you see here with the table of, land use table at the top and then the definition at the bottom. And then as I mentioned at the last meeting, North Carolina general statutes require that anytime an ordinance is amended, that it first receive planning board review and recommendation, and that there's also a consistency statement along with that recommendation to ensure that it lines up with the county's other plans. So for example, unified development ordinance or the comprehensive plans, things of that nature. So the only real difference on this item, as opposed to the last meeting, is that consistency statement. And so again, Mr. Chairman, unless there's any proposed revisions to what we have in terms of the actual text of the ordinance, then I can just read that consistency statement. And obviously, if you guys want to alter the consistency statement in any way, then we can address that at this meeting as well.
Is there any other amendments to this anyone wants to make? And Mr. Overman, did we send this, I mean, is this the watershed review board, are they
This would go, if you approve it today, it goes to the county commissioners next for final adoption. Yes, sir. So let me read this draft consistency statement. And again, this would just be, if you approve this, this consistency statement would go together as a package to the county commissioners. So the statement just simply reads, pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 160D-604D, the Caswell County Planning Board finds that the attached amendment to the High Impact Development Ordinance is consistent with the Caswell County Comprehensive Plan because it seeks to encourage policies that assure a healthy environment for Caswell County. Furthermore, these regulatory changes are in line with North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality stream buffer setbacks and are in some instances stricter than Caswell County's current watershed protection regulations as found in UDO Article 10, Part 2. So if y'all have any additional thoughts on anything else that may need to go into the consistency statement, please let me know. I'm happy to further revise it. You know, we're not on any deadline with this, so it's really at the board's discretion as to when this kind of final package is ready to go before the commissioners.
I have one discussion, I guess. So, just to recap, in the HIDO, we have 4 classes. And class 1 and 2 had 100 feet stream setback. Class 3 and 4 had 150. You recall we did some comparisons of other counties who have similar ordinances. That package, I think you also had included, Matthew, and to send, assuming this gets approved, we'd send that over to the commissioners just so they have that information as well. So thank you for including that. So anyway, the change was to go from 100 feet to class 1 and 2 to 50 feet. And then for class 3 from 150 to 75. I guess just in terms of changes from what we have, I think Matthew's got everything documented at this point, based on the fact that the other counties that I looked at, you know, having 100 feet of stream buffer for the class 3, class 4 stuff. My preference would be to leave or change the 150 to 100 instead of 75.
For class 3 and 4.
For class 3 and 4. That would be more consistent with what the other counties have.
Matthew, do we have, a plan from the others? Yeah, do we have a plan from the other counties? I think we had one in the past, but I don't remember where.
Yeah, when the county constructed the high impact development ordinance, I know that it was borrowed quite heavily from Alamance County, and Scott was very much involved in that process.
If you look, Alamance was the first one on the list, actually. They're.
So this is just a pretty good comparative table that you had put together, and I think this was presented at the May meeting with other counties. And if I recall, this list of counties that you put together here are also counties in the state of North Carolina that do not have countywide zoning, but they do have a industrial type development ordinance.
Exactly.
And you can see down at the bottom, so the NCDEQ standard for a riparian buffer is 50 feet. And so we would still be, you can't do any less strict than the state standard, but you can do more, assuming that doing more is justifiable and doesn't basically open you up to kind of legal trouble.
So the state sets it's no less than 50 feet.
Correct.
In that case that we had with the solar farm, where were we at on those setbacks? You know?
That standard was 150 feet, but at the time, the planning board's interpretation of the stream buffer was that that 150 feet was spread out in both directions. So I think
Actually, the solar farm would be a class 1, right?
right,
And they were, so it was 100 feet.
100 feet.
But there was
that's right, 100.
confusion, and there was a stream running right through the middle of the solar farm, and so the question was, does that mean 100 feet both ways, or does this mean 100 feet total, meaning 50 feet
And that was ultimately the determination the planning
That
board
was
came to,
the
do,
thing that
50
was
and 50.
confusing to all of us, right? So the language that Matthew has adopted here, it says, okay, if it's 50 feet for a class one now, that means it's on, if there's a stream running through, it applies to both sides of the stream, which is what most of the other counties were,
Correct.
their language, it was just clarification language. Right? So, yeah.
Does anyone want to add to what they said on that we want?
So your proposal would be
Proposal for 100.
class 3 and 4, instead of a 75-foot buffer, it would go back to a 100-foot buffer.
So even on a class 4, the state minimum is 50 feet.
Yeah, the state doesn't set up classes, the counties would set up classes of what they deem as, least severe to most severe industrial developments, you might say, but the state doesn't have classifications for industrial type. It just has a standard stream buffer.
And just refresh our memory, the class 4 is only,
Class 4, there's only 2 or 3 uses. One of them is a rock quarries and I think rock quarries, asphalt plants, and maybe like nuclear waste storage or something.
Yeah,
something
really,
Coal
Mining,
ash.
quarry,
Coal
research,
ash.
extraction, cement manufacturing, coal ash, nuclear waste.
get some of those. 100 feet not even good enough, but you know, that's a different topic. Yeah.
so does anyone else want to entertain any more amendments to that, or we want to vote on it? Just say we amend to that.
Well,
I'll make a motion.
So, okay.
To amend class 3 and 4 to 100 feet.
Anyone else want to make a motion?
Well, my concern is if these nuclear plants or whatever, we want 150 feet, we want them actually further than 150 feet.
You ain't gonna get one.
I know, but, it's up with asphalt and these other things,
Right.
150 feet to me, it's not even far enough, so that's my concern right there. So, why not leave it where it's set, because of the operation that it applies to?
well, you got a motion on the floor, and so the procedure at this point would be a second to the motion and then debate. If there's no second, then hypothetically the motion dies.
Ms. Oakley's got a motion on the floor for 100 feet. Is anyone second?
So the motion dies for lack of.
Motion dies.
Yeah.
Entertain any more motions, or
Yeah, again, I motion to 150 feet.
Mr. Foster?
Class 3 and 4.
Yeah, for 3 and 4, 150 feet is up there now. I just leave it there, based on what you said about what it applies to, the operations that it applies to. Cement, asphalt, I think we want as much buffer as we can with the type of operation. We already want the problem now with asphalt, company.
Mr. Foster has a motion for 150 feet for class 3 and 4. Is there any others? The second?
And Mr. Foster, you, for class 1 and 2, you're not proposing
No.
to change that.
No.
We have a motion on the floor. Is any second? Second. Mr. Oakley seconds. So now we need to take a vote by hand, please. A vote, motion, second, made and second for 150 feet, for class 3 and 4. Raise your hand.
Raise your hand
For class 3 and 4, 150,
to vote yes on the motion.
to make a yes on the motion for 150 feet.
That remain where it's at.
That remain towards it.
So was that 2 votes?
2 votes.
Okay.
Mr. Oakley and Mr. Foster.
Okay.
Would like to entertain any more, motions?
Make a motion,
Well, so you need to dispense with this motion first. So
Okay.
you've got 2 votes, which is not a majority, so you need to now collect the no votes.
Okay, how many votes against the 150 feet?
So the motion's off the table, so now you can entertain other motions.
All right, any other motions? Okay.
I make a motion, we pass it as, item majority. Go down here with 75 feet. With 50 feet on class 1, class 2, 50 feet, class 3, 75, and class 4, 75.
I second.
Have a motion on the floor for to remain the same as the sheet that reads at 50, 50, 75, and 75 for class 3 and 4. And we have a second.
And I just have a question before you vote. So, in totality here, what you're looking at is, as we had discussed at the last meeting, you've got your changes to the HIDO, which are the stream buffer setbacks of the definition. You got the consistency statement, which state law requires go with it. And then at the last meeting, Mr. Oakley had discussed making sure that that presentation goes to the commissioners as well, simply as an information item, so they have a little bit of background information. So would this motion encapsulate all that, or is this motion specifically on the data on the land use table?
I like to encapsulate all that.
Mr. Thompson, would you like to say second? So now we got, motion second. Let's take a vote. I'll raise your hand. Or to keep it as a sheet of 50, 50, and 75 for class 3 and 4. Raise your hand. Yeah.
You can vote, yeah. The 4 votes in favor?
Yes, 4 votes in favor.
And any votes against?
How many votes against? I'm sorry. 2 votes against.
All right.
So the motion carried now is.
Yes, sir. So the next, so on my end now, I will basically just prepare this information, send it to Mr. Smith and get it on the next appropriate, county commission.
And then the sheet that Mr. Oakley was talking about will be submitted with the.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Yes, we're done with that, unless there was some other Mr. Holman in that range of anything else that had to do with the HIDO. Like there was something else.
Yes, sir. So that is item A under unfinished business is now addressed. And so the next will just be item B.
So the temporary RV placement amendment, I guess where we stand on that, I don't remember on the last.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So, board members, if you'll recall, this is an item that I brought to your attention, here it was. About the same time we started to debate the HIDO amendments. The Castle County Unified Development Ordinance already allows a situation where if somebody wants to build a permanent residence, then they can set up a manufactured home and live in it for a period of 3 years while they're building their permanent residence. However, we have, over the last several years, gotten an increasing number of requests to basically do the same thing, but to live in an RV while you're building your permanent residence. So we have on occasion allowed that just from an administrative perspective, but this amendment would clarify it and explicitly allow it in the Caswell County codes. So in particular here, really the bulk of the amendment to this section of the UDO, this is section 9.42 of the UDO. And this would add section 9.42.3. And it would basically read that a recreational vehicle may be used as a temporary residence for no more than 3 years while constructing a permanent residence, or in the event of a natural disaster or a catastrophe has rendered the primary residence uninhabitable. And if you will recall, let's see if I can make a little highlight here. See if that showed up on the screen there. Yeah, if you'll recall, at the last meeting, instead of permanent residence there, it said site-built house. And so just for the sake of consistency, the board asked that I change that term specifically to also read permanent residence. So this is really the only change from the last meeting to this meeting with regards to, the allowance of RVs. And then I do have a consistency statement drafted up for that one as well, and I'll be glad to read it, if you'd like me to.
I think, let you read it.
Sure thing. So your draft consistency statement on this one would say pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 160D-604D, the Caswell County Planning Board finds that the attached amendment to Article 9, Part 5 of the UDO recreational vehicles is consistent with existing regulations because it is substantially similar to the existing allowance for mobile homes to be used as a temporary dwelling while residents are building their permanent homes. Furthermore, it is also similar in nature to the county's current allowance for temporary recreational vehicles as found in UDO section 9.42.1. So again, that's just a draft statement. If you guys have anything in mind to add to that or change at all about the consistency statement, then I'm happy to entertain any changes.
Does anyone want to add to that? Mr. Oldham, I would like to
Yes,
ask
sir.
a question. It was brought up to me, someone was asking me about, how would that enforcement be on that, so to speak?
Yeah.
I had no clue.
Yeah, so it's a great question. So at the end of the day, we're really an enforcement or a complaint driven enforcement office. First off, when somebody acquires a permit for a period of 3 years, we do have a way to set up a calendar reminder or set a reminder in our internal software system known as iWork, so that we can have a little ping or a little calendar reminder over the course of 3 years. Typically, folks who come in and they ask for these types of permits, they're really looking to build their permanent residence as quickly as they can. So as a matter of fact, I kind of joke with them. They come in and I say, okay, here's your permit. You got 3 years. And they go, that shouldn't take me 3 years. And I say, well, I bought a house in 2017 and it took me about 2 years just to renovate it. So you're building yours from scratch. You never know what could happen. And so, typically the format is they'll get their temporary, permit. They will coordinate with environmental health. They'll coordinate with building inspections. And then very soon after they're getting their permits to build their permanent house, they're going through the process and they're getting their certificate of occupancy. So on these types of permits, we rarely have to worry about somebody expiring that 3-year term and then we've got to take enforcement action. If they do expire the 3-year term, obviously it's in our system, so we know exactly the date that they requested the permit, and I write on every single permit the date that it expires, so they know that up front. If we get a call and a complaint or something is particularly egregious where they have built a deck onto their RV, their tires are flat, they got potted plants, they got an above ground pool, they've got evidence that they've really converted this thing into a permanent residence, that's when we would take an enforcement action, cite them with a letter and cite them with a fine if they were in violation of the ordinance.
And so if someone has, this is another question from me, so if someone has a permanent well and a permanent septic tank on site.
Yeah.
and their argument is that they can continue to use it.
Yeah.
And then it still complies with 3 years of ownership.
That's correct, and that's actually required. So environmental health here is going to require that they tie into a permanent well and septic. And as we talked about at the last meeting, the ideal situation is they get their site flagged for well and septic, they install their systems, they connect the mobile home or RV up to it. And then at the time they get the certificate of occupancy for that permanent house, they just switch it out. And so the septic connection and the well connection just ties into the permanent house.
The other question was if someone has a permanent structure on site before, if it was a covering of some kind. How does it?
Yeah, so there's no requirement in Caswell County that you have a primary dwelling before you have an accessory building. So if somebody wants to come in, and we've actually gotten quite a few of these, somebody owns a rather large piece of land, they want to build a barn first and then build their house afterwards. That's perfectly allowed. And in fact, when it comes to these RVs, you know, once you disconnect an RV from the well and septic, it's just basically another vehicle, right? So it may actually be easier for folks to just say, okay, my RV's disconnected now, I'm just gonna go park it under the shelter or in the barn or the garage or whatever. As opposed to a mobile home, which you have to sell or move to another property or whatever. It's you could argue that it's easier to store and keep an RV after you're done living in it than it is a manufactured home. So that may actually be a good arrangement. If they build a barn first or something like that, then they got their RV, they can just store the RV in the barn once they're done using it.
Somebody had asked me, that's why I was curious.
That's a great hypothetical question. Yeah. These are the types of things that we get to deal with on a daily basis.
Any other amendments to that or?
No, that's all that I've got. So it would just be the amendment to 9.42 of the UDO and then the consistency statement. If the board is comfortable with it, then just like the HIDO amendment before this one, you would vote and it was on up to the commissioners.
Does anyone want to add to or go with this amendment for this as is? A motion to, Doc, got a motion to. Second.
Right.
New business.
And the votes?
Oh, sorry. All in favor for this?
Unanimous?
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Here again, this will go as a copy of the current UDO.
So it's got to go before the commissioners.
And then it-
Yeah, the commissioners may reject it. They may adopt it as is. They may make their own changes. And they've got the final authority on these types of amendments.
Anything else to add to that? Anybody? New business, Babs Farm Estate.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually thought we were gonna have two major subdivisions on your agenda today, but you just got the one. So the preliminary major subdivision before you today contains a proposal for 7 new lots at the intersection of Cherry Grove Road and Dabbs Farm Road in the Anderson Township. All major subdivisions, which are those categorized as containing 7 or more new lots, must receive approval from the planning board in accordance with UDO section 8.7. As the ordinance requires, excuse me, as the ordinance requires, the developer has conducted a pre-application meeting with the planning department and has presented sketch plans of this preliminary plat. The subdivider has paid the necessary fees associated with review. The surveyor has submitted the necessary number of preliminary plats in a timely manner for your review today. For those of you who received this via email, you'll now find the 18x24 copies on your desk. In my review capacity as subdivision administrator, I have found that all lot size, road frontage, lot width, right-of-way, layout, and other subdivision requirements for all lots have been met, and it is submitted today for your approval. Since all proposed lots will be accessed by existing state-maintained roads, no private road installation or upgrade will be needed. As you make your determination today, please note that section 8.7.4.2.3 of the UDO gives you the following options. Option number 1 is to approve the subdivision as is. Number 2 is to approve the subdivision with conditions. And number 3 would be to disapprove of the subdivision. Any of those recommendations must be made within 45 days of initial consideration, which begins today. With that, I am happy to answer any questions that you might have about the proposed subdivision before you.
Scott, have they started building on those lots yet?
I highly doubt it. If they have, that's not approved. That's not allowed.
Hey, on lot 6 and 7, those roads are going in there, those are not state roads, are they? Coming off the straight road there.
Yeah, so that's just a 55 or a minimum of 50-foot wide section of the lot that allows them to tie back into the main area. That is what's known, you may have heard it referred to as a flag lot. Caswell County allows flag lots. We don't have any prohibition against flag lots. Some jurisdictions do not allow flag lots. But the reason that they're shaped the way that they are is we have a 50-foot road frontage requirement. So that's why you'll see lot number 7 down there is as small as it gets, right at 50 feet. And then lot 2 is a combined, roughly 35 feet and 15 and some odd feet. So you've got just over 50 feet there.
In the which direction would the front of the house be sitting, they have, it's out to the front of the lot.
Yeah, for lot 6 and 7, they've got some play in there in the wide portions of the lots in which they could configure it. I would assume those homes would either face south or west, but they're not required to face one direction or the other. If there's any, on that type of thing, if there's any discretion as to what is considered the front of the side or the rear of the lot, and they really wanted to be particular about it, then in my discretion as UDO administrator, I could actually make a judgment and say, no, this is gonna be the front of your lot versus the side versus the rear, because that's gonna dictate exactly what setbacks would apply to that lot.
Well, we got a lot of acres, 2 acres and almost 3 acres, so.
Correct, yeah. With acreage that large, they shouldn't have an issue with setbacks or anything.
And there's no, I think we talked about this one last time for this approval, they don't have to give you any information in terms of what they're planning to do. This is like the developer builds the house, or they could, and they could sell the land to just individuals, or is it like whatever goes at the next?
Yeah, after the subdivision is complete, within reason, whatever the new property owners of the developer want to do, they can do. So there's no requirement for housing type. They could do single wide, double wide manufactured home. They could do all the way up to a rather large stick built house. They could simply sell the lot after it's, divided. They could do a modest amount of development, maybe install a well and septic system and then sell the lot. So they've got pretty wide latitude on what happens with the properties after they're divided.
And you mentioned that term flag lots, which I see what that is from the drawing here, but what would be the, that some counties don't allow that, is there, other than just carving up land into weird spaces, is there some other reason for not allowing it that you know of?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, I've never dealt in any other jurisdictions where they don't allow flag lots. I think it can make access difficult on some lots. I think that some jurisdictions also seek to have more uniformity with their lots so that they're more or less squared or rectangular throughout, as opposed to having those stems and branches on them. That's a good question. I'm not sure why other jurisdictions would not allow them. But like I said, they're perfectly legal in Caswell County.
Mr. Overland, this is similar to the same, to the other development we approved in it with this type, where Mr. Overland was talking about with the flag entrance or the stems and coming for the road. I think the last one we approved.
Yeah, the last one did have 1 or 2 lots. You're talking about Gregory's Grange number 3. That did have a couple. It was a little different because they were narrow at the cul-de-sac. But yeah, that's correct. Yeah, they were rather narrow there. But again, the only thing we look for there is that they achieve the correct width at the curve of the cul-de-sac, which is actually smaller, which is 35 feet on a cul-de-sac as opposed to 50. So when it comes to the shape of lots, really unless the lot is particularly narrow, get a really long, narrow lot, obviously we can approve that because your building site width has to be 125 feet. So it has to be wide enough at some point to accommodate building width or building site width. Then you've got to achieve setbacks, in different watersheds, you've got different lot minimums. But other than that, hypothetically, you could draw up a lot pretty much in any shape you want.
Any other comments or any other amendments to that? This,
So you stated that it passes everything that you looked at in terms of lot size and road frontage and all that.
That's correct. Yeah, from a subdivision ordinance perspective, it certainly passed my review. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't let it come before you if it didn't. They send in the preliminary and we'll go back and forth if they need to alter some things. And they did. They had to alter a couple of certificates on here. I had some questions about width on maybe a couple of the lots, but then they made those amendments and got it in a timely manner. They also have to submit it. This had to have been submitted, these paper copies 14 days prior to today's meeting, and they met that requirement. So.
Mr. Oakley, Made a motion to pass it as is. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Harris. All raise your hand for approval. Motion carries.
All right.
Recommend planning department up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Guys, I don't have anything for you in the way of broadbands. I don't know, Tony, if you have had any conversations. Tony or Tom, you've had any conversations?
Just on.
Either one of us. Yeah.
You first, because I think you have more, I know I wouldn't.
Okay, I met with, Spectrum last week and they're, according to phase one, they have about 4,000 homes in contract to connect, they got about 3,600, about 90% complete. And they said it would be Allegheny County phase one in November this year. And we're looking for phase two to crank up, which is the Ray Grant's, contract, the site pay, just start within 2 months.
That's great.
And what is IPO? It's just more connections, I think it's 600 connections.
Okay, but the same, device and everything, 3.5.
To my knowledge, it's the same thing. We'll get Spectrum Friday.
I tell you what's
Ready
great.
for that map? Do you have the map as of today? Does it show?
But you can.
Yeah, I don't even know if that exists, really.
Cable, even cell phones.
Yeah, I started off with 300 megabytes, I gave him a call, and I really didn't need 500, but I went and got 500, took 10 minutes, to increase from 300 to 500. And I've got things that can tell me the speed and everything, it's amazing, it really is, it's a quality product,
Why is it? Really gonna make a difference, but like some roads are running underground, some roads is overhead. What determines?
Whether the power company gives them access to running over the poles or not. If they do it because it's cheaper.
Well, I know they come down 62, toward Milton.
It's like Duke
Pole,
Power, I think
They
Duke
split
Power.
off Blanche Road and went underground. Other places.
I asked the representative, I was at one of the meetings, I asked one of the representatives there, he said they prefer to go on the pole or some, or no, under the ground, but some places they're not allowed to go underground because of, it's on somebody's property, they might not give them permission to do it, or it's too hard to get to. So that's when they'll go on the poles.
As much orange cabbage you see sitting around, you would think most of it's underground, but according to Spectrum, about 70% of it is okay.
Yeah, from what I've been told, they're basically just taking the path of least resistance, where they can get on a pole and get existing access and everything, they're gonna do that. And if they have to, they'll go underground, so.
At one point, I heard Duke Power allow them to put it on the poles and Piedmont Electric did, but whether that's true or not.
I remember maybe it was, could have been a year ago at this point, but they had reported back that they had a really great relationship so far with Piedmont Electric. And they had also coordinated with NCDOT, so they have to request the terminology is like a right of encroachment or a line encroach, some sort of industry kind of terminology. And they were doing one by one by one by one. And then NCDOT finally said, you know what, guys, just bundle them all together and send that to us. So they would group together maybe 75 or 100 requests for encroachment and then send that in. So they had even kind of ironed out the process with NCDOT.
And Zytel was supposed to start their part in 2 months. Okay. That's the fill in between places, I guess.
No, that's, well, it is a fill-in, but, I think, Spectrum will cover about 60% of the county, and Zytel's will cover another X, number of households. Then you're gonna have 2 other contracts coming through to connect the remote areas, off the road, things that, they couldn't get running, get real fast. That's gonna take a while, but that, everyone that wants broadband in the county should have it within 2 years.
Let me see if I can share this. You guys may remember this from the last meeting. This was just taken directly from the county commission meeting. I think the mid-July county commission meeting, and this is just there. eligible passings. So the red lines represent the infrastructure and the blue dots represent, individual connections. Trying to see if I can get that larger. Does that look clear on the screen there? Any other questions on broadband? All right, moving along on cell towers. I expected that you would have one or maybe two cell tower applications on the agenda today. The one, that will be at the end of David Sarton Road, between David Sarton Road and 86 has been pushed back to September. You know, this meeting today was as early as we could have it. It's the fourth Tuesday of the month, and the month began on Tuesday. So, they had to have all the information in to me by the 7th in order to run notices twice in the newspaper, and they got me information on the 8th. So I couldn't get it in the newspaper, which meant it couldn't go on your agenda. So barring something unforeseen happening, I expect that tower will be back on your agenda for September. And then I have another application packet coming in, a little bit of a time at a time down in the, off of, Cherry Grove Road. A little bit southwest of, the intersection with, Stony Creek School Road. Southwest of there.
Okay, so this is tower already over there, so we.
Correct, yeah, so this will be, I want to say maybe a mile or so, maybe a mile and a half further southwest. So this really, once this thing is up and running, it's a 300-foot guide tower. So it's gonna be taller than your standard 199-foot. 300-foot guide tower with, I think, 5 potential antenna attachments. When that thing is up and running, you should really have excellent service down in the Cherry Grove Road area.
Well, what's the radius of that one?
Yeah, I think typically they've got about a 3-mile radius. Yeah, and the radius, interestingly enough, as cell tower technology has developed, the radius has shrunk because the data stream is so much more intense. It's kind of like a trickle out of a garden hose versus a fire hose, because when they started building towers 20, 30, whatever years ago, you're just doing calls and texts. Well, now you're doing Zoom calls, you're downloading videos, you're making TikTok. I don't even know how TikTok works, but people are doing TikTok or whatever. And so just the data demand on the towers is a lot more. And as a result, the coverage footprint is smaller. But nevertheless, that would be very positive for that area of the county. So you could have, very plausibly, could have 2 cell tower public hearings on your agenda for September. All right. The only other thing I want to make you guys aware of is we do have a draft billboard ordinance that's in the works. Myself and Donnie Powell and our interim county manager met on that last week. And unless I'm mistaken on this, Mr. County Manager, that should be on the September 5th Commissioner's agenda. So the format would be, I think that they want to just take a look at a draft and then let us know some direction on what they may or may not want to do with billboards. By state statute, that has to go before the planning board for review and recommendation. And so that amendment process eventually would be very similar to what we just did with RVs and Idaho, for example. So you will get an opportunity to review, make recommendations, have the consistency statement, all that good stuff. And then ultimately it'll go back to the commissioners for their final yay or nay.
All existing billboards will grandfather in, I guess.
Yeah, the non-conformity provisions, if I remember it, I have drafted it to fit into the UDO. The UDO has an entire article about non-conformities, which is Article 7. So my draft references heavily Article 7, and so the existing non-conformity provisions of Article 7 would apply to billboards just like they would any existing structure.
Would you have need to control what is advertised on the billboard?
I don't know that any jurisdiction can legally control what would be advertised. There is some language in there about controlling the lighting of the billboard. Some of the appearance standards, like a kind of a wooden or a historic kind of frame, the color of the base, the color of the construction materials, things of that nature. I think we can control like flashing lights or, maybe neon coloring, like, in neon fluorescent, that type of coloring, but I'm not sure that we could control content.
But it is permitted now that you have to get a permit to put up the billboard.
No, right now you do not have to get a permit to.
So there's nothing, a billboard could go up without any.
Well, they've got to get approval from, building inspections, but I think building inspections just has a standard sign permit regardless of the size or type of the sign, which I believe is $75. And obviously, if they're gonna have lighting or if it's gonna be an electronic billboard, then they gotta get an electrical permit. Outside of that,
And there's no rule usage on electronic boards as of right now.
not as of right now. That's correct.
So it's like what you brought up about the content, I don't know how that would work.
Right.
I don't know how that works.
I don't know that the General Assembly would allow jurisdictions to have content regulations on billboards. I think that might be a pretty serious First Amendment issue.
I was just kind of, the old massage parlor.
Well, from what I understand, the town of Yanceyville has basically said you cannot do what is known as off-premise billboard advertising. So for example, somebody wanted to build a billboard in front of, Rio's Mexican restaurant. That billboard could not advertise Caesar's Casino. It could advertise Rio's because it's on the same premise, but you couldn't do off-premise. So they control it in a very broad sense. They control content that way. But, if we were to say, no, your billboard has to say the Carolina Hurricanes are the greatest hockey team in the world. We probably, I would prefer that, but you might get in trouble. But that's all I've got for, planning department updates.
Are you basing the draft on the existing county ordinance?
So, not entirely. So what I did in the research component of this is, NCDOT actually has some rather interesting and not really heavy, not really overly burdensome, but NCDOT regulates billboards fairly significantly. So for example, the distance from a right of way, whether or not they're going on a designated interstate or highway or a scenic highway, they're licensed, believe it or not. You get a tag on your billboard, just like you get a tag on your car from DMV or NCDOT. They even have language about the vegetative cutout in the immediate perimeter of the billboard. So NCDOT actually has a whole lot to say on billboards. That's I think that's, General Statute 135, Article 11, if I remember correctly. Then in the land use regulations, it's the, General Statute 160D 912, I believe. Basically talks about what a county or a local government can and can't do with regards to controlling content or making all billboards non-conforming and say, you just gotta tear them down. So it kind of protects the billboards in that manner. And then I did look just right next door at Rockingham County to see what Rockingham County did with their billboards. Now, obviously, they're a little bit different because they've got countywide zoning. But in terms of, and then actually we talked about, NC Department of Revenue, they put together a presentation that was actually very instructive. And I think it was meant for tax assessors to better understand billboards so that they could levy property taxes. And it had a great deal of information in there about dimensions, for example, and structure type and average heights, average size and all that good stuff. So those have been my primary resources that I've leaned on in putting together this draft.
I think you said, changing topic, didn't you say the city of Yanceyville has banned all new billboards?
Well, they haven't banned all new billboards, but like I said, they do not allow any off-premise billboards. So again, you can't, the easy example is Caesar's Casino can't say, we're just gonna put a billboard in Yanceyville. Caesar's Casino doesn't own the property here.
Yanceyville that can build a billboard at this point will be to advertise for their own.
That's correct. Yeah, as I understand it.
Well, somebody, not from Yanceyville, build a billboard, but they cannot allow anybody to advertise on the billboard unless that is within the town limits.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna get a Capitol or outdoor or a
Yeah, I mean, it's
Lamar,
fine.
a billboard company to construct it, but the actual advertisement would have to be on premise.
And how about if you were a landlord and you were contacted to rent a billboard, advertising their company, landlord's not got a business, it's leasing the building to somebody.
That's a good question. I hesitate to answer for the town.
I was contacted, when I was about to suggest that.
Is that right? Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, I would just say if anybody has questions on that, contact the town manager. Cause I saw, I'm a town resident, so I go to all the meetings. A lot of times I'm the only person in the audience at the meetings. So I got a draft of the town ordinance prior to the meeting. And then they did make some modest changes, before they adopted it on the town level, but, I haven't studied it extremely closely.
Any updates on 86, everything the same?
Yeah, I haven't gotten any updates from NCDOT. They're working on the bridge replacement up there. The next big item on the agenda is gonna be the adding of the turnout lanes, passing lanes at various portions. And then long term, at some point down the road, 4 lanes, but I just don't know when that's.
So the bridge they're doing now, they're gonna be a permanent bridge, or that will be a temporary until they gonna fix the.
That's a great question. I actually don't know if they're going to divert traffic to cut out, go over a new bridge and then cut back, or if they're gonna build kind of cast it in place and then shift it over, or exactly what the format
I've
is.
been told it's a permanent bridge.
Okay,
They'll build that, leave it, build a new bridge, just leave it there. And also, the NCDOT supposed to have the commissions on the 18th September.
gotcha. Okay.
Do you think we get more, way in time soon?
I do know when it comes to NCDOT, our regional engineer, Jason Julian, is gonna be retiring by the end of the year. I think October or November. So we could be, everybody I've ever dealt with at NCDOT is fantastic, but we could be possibly losing some institutional knowledge there when Jason retires. So get your questions in now,
Has there been any idea as far as how traffic has expanded or increased since the casino opened?
I haven't seen any data. I mean, I've heard anecdotal evidence, people talking about a lot more traffic up and down 86. I know that big picture, they are expecting 1.5 North Carolinians to travel to the Danville Casino annually. That's North Carolinians from all corners of the state. 60% of all that traffic is coming through Caswell County. Half on 29, half on 86. So in aggregate, that means we can expect about 400 to 500,000 people driving up and down this road every year, in addition to current traffic. Now,
It
maybe,
seems like to me it's really increased a lot.
yeah, now maybe that's projected out for full completion of the built out site, but you may have seen some of the data from the past 3 months. I mean, they're just going gangbusters out at this casino. Revenue and visitation and everything is up every single month since they opened.
Is there anything our county manager, in play for Campbell Young to get some of the profit from, the casino, something that we can do to, I know, for one thing, I know, electric, the sites for electric vehicle cars, that possibility, some funds that we can get, they're gonna be having going back and forth.
Well, I was hired as an economic development, so probably number one to do is to dig into that.
Okay.
But it's lasted one day, so one day I'll go back to that job.
Okay.
Hey, one of my neighbors, he's been to the casino multiple times, and he says every time he sits at a table, it's people from Raleigh there.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Where is it?
the North Carolina, Raleigh, Durham,
Oh,
Chapel Hill. He said every time he sits at a table, it's 2 or 3 people from North Carolina, not just here, but south and east of us.
That's fascinating. I guess that's about what we should expect though, right?
Yes.
$51 million they made so far.
Yeah.
Incredible.
From a planning perspective,
Yeah.
from a planning perspective, I've got a little bit of a fear of, I hesitate to call it undesirable development. But, if you've ever driven to Myrtle Beach, you see the fireworks stand right at the state line, or you see, maybe a pawn shop or kind of a rundown motel. My fear a little bit is some of those things that are either not as easy to build in Danville, or the legality of it is different. Tattoos, for example, cigarettes, fireworks, for example. I don't know in particular, but those types of things where you've got different laws that apply in different states, you can get that popping up right at the state line in Caswell County, because we don't have zoning. It may be a lot easier to build here, cheaper to build here, you know, easier in general than building in the city of Danville. That's a fear of mine. I don't know if that might come true.
But we don't have the infrastructure.
Yeah.
I think that's gonna deter a lot of. more.
Well, maybe, I mean, we do have water both on
You got a dam.
North 86 and Highway 700, right? Now, whether or not they can tap into it, I'm not sure.
They may drive in on RVs and trailers, put up vape shops on the corner.
I think I said they're gonna put a big RV, camp, bottom of Goodyear in that area,
Yeah, Jenny Lane, I think.
somewhere in there, yeah. Or like a $100 camper or whatever.
So I don't think any of us can anticipate what it is, but, you know, you either act or you're gonna be acted upon. We're getting ready to be acted upon some way, we won't make.
But that's, like I said, that's all I've got for planning department updates.
Does anyone else have anything else to offer or add?
Make a motion with adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn. Second, Dan.
All right,
Motion to adjourn.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations.
Say that.
Yeah.